Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala, thumma amma ba'd. To proceed, today inshallah we will finish the section on al-ahwal, the states, inner spiritual states. That's from station 61 to station 70. Today we will cover station 70, which is the station of al-zawq or taste. And inshallah, next time we have a tazkiyah session, and then I don't know if we will do two fiqh sessions next time or not. We will talk about it later, inshallah. But next time we do a tazkiyah session, we will start the section on al-walayat. Walayat is the plural of walaya. Walaya is intimate friendship, translated sometimes as sainthood, translated sometimes as holiness. So walaya is the singular of walayat. The section that we will cover next, inshallah, will be the section on al-walayat, and then thereafter there will be a section on al-haqa'iq, which is truth. And then there will be the section on an-nihayat, which is endings, basically the ending of the path to Allah and the stations, the highest stations. But as we said before, the stations overlap, and no one can ever deny that ihsan, which we've already covered, is of the highest stations, or the highest station, at least in the prophetic terminology. This would be, inshallah, what we will cover in the tazkiyah session, and then in fiqh we will talk about al-ghasb, which can be translated as misappropriation. But if you want to translate it in a way that is more descriptive, because misappropriation could be the miss in this misappropriation could mean different things, but ghasb in particular means the wrongful, forceful appropriation or seizure of the property of others. Wrongful and forceful. Each one of those words is consequential and is necessary for proper definition. Wrongful, forceful appropriation of the property of others. But let's first go over zawq or taste. The Shaykh, rahimahullah ta'ala, Imam al-Harawi, who died in the year 481 after Hijrah, said in his book Manaazil As-Saa'ireen, قال الله عز وجل هذا ذكر. Allah the Almighty said, this is a reminder, and that's in Surah Sa'd. قال الله عز وجل هذا ذكر. This is a reminder. And then the Shaykh, and certainly the relevance of this, as Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah in his book Madarij As-Salikeen comments, the relevance to the topic of al-zawq is that dhikr is a prerequisite for what comes after it. Zawq is a prerequisite for what comes after it, or that dhikr is a prerequisite for zawq. After you remember, you start to taste. But like I said, all of those spiritual states overlap, and also someone may say that you will not have proper dhikr until you have proper zawq or proper taste. Then the Shaykh proceeds to define al-zawq, and he said, al-zawq abqa min al-wajd wa ajla min al-barq. وهو على 3 درجات. الذوق أبقى من الوجد وأجلى من البرق وهو على 3 درجات. Taste is more permanent than wajd and clearer than barq, and it is of 3 levels. we've gone over al-Wajd and al-Barq before. Al-Wajd is the intense spiritual sort of experience that is not invoked, nor it is earned, but rather granted, and it is brief. And we said that al-Barq, the lightning, is also an intense spiritual state, but unlike al-Wajd, which is encountered on the path, al-Barq is encountered prior to embarking on the path. It invites you to come in. It's a permission for you to come in. And he's saying that al-Zawq is more permanent and clearer, more permanent than al-Wajd because it is brief, it is transient, but al-Zawq is a station that you stay in. It makes you a better taster of haqa'iq al-Iman, the truths of Iman, and it's more permanent. And also when it comes to al-Barq, the lightning may not be very discernible by you, whereas the taste, it is clearer, and there is no ambiguity when it comes to having the right taste. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned the concept of zawq when he said, ذاق طعم الإيمان من رضي بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبمحمد رسولا أو نبيا. He tasted ذاق طعم الإيمان. This is reported by Muslim from al-Abbas radiallahu anhu. He tasted the savor of faith, Iman. He who is content or pleased with Allah as his Lord, Islam as his religion or deen, and Muhammad as his prophet or messenger. So in this, the Prophet ﷺ tells us about the person who is going to be able to taste faith, not just acquire it through intellectual inquiry, but rather taste it, feel it, experience it at the level of the heart. Not the one who accepted, because that is what where the evidence led him, accepted Allah as his Lord, Muhammad as his messenger, and Islam as his deen, but it is the one who is content with. That's radiya. It's not just the simple qabul or acceptance, but it is a rida, which is to be pleased with. That's pleasure, contentment. So to be pleased with, content with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as your Lord, Islam as your deen, and Muhammad as your messenger. This is a phase that is higher than Islam. قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا. The nomads, the nomadic Bedouins say آمنا, and this is certainly, this is حكم أغلبي. So the nomadic Bedouins around the messenger, this is about the majority of them. It does not mean that there could not be a nomadic Bedouin who is actually a faithful believer or a mu'min. But this is about, the majority. قُلْ لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا, say you have not yet had Iman, وَلَكِنْ قُولُوا أَسْلَمْنَا, but say we accepted Islam. Aslamna, we became Muslim, we accepted Islam. So the distinction here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted this to them. You are Muslimin. You have said La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and you're not lying about it. You've truly accepted Islam. You're not hypocrites. But you're not the mu'mineen yet. And as we said before, Islam and Iman, إذا اجتمع افترق وإذا افترق اجتمع. When they are together in the same sentence, they mean different things. and when they're mentioned separately, they mean the same thing. So when you put Islam and Iman together in the same sentence, you probably want to say that they're different things. And when you mention Islam or Iman separately, like you talk about Islam, that is just like Iman, and Iman is like Islam. So they are synonymous when they are mentioned separately, but they are different when they are mentioned together in the same sentence. And when they're mentioned together in the same sentence, Iman could be related to the beliefs, and Islam could be related to the practices, or Iman could be a higher level than Islam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells them here that no, you are Muslimin, you have accepted Islam, you do say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah truthfully, but you're not believers. So in the sense that you're not mu'mineen, you have not ascended to that level yet. If you want to ascend to that level, you want to have pleasure with Allah as your Lord, Islam as your deen, Muhammad as your messenger. You want to be content with this, and you want to be happy about it. It should make a difference. You should be rejoicing in the fact that you have accepted faith, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had honored you with this deen. You should be grateful, thankful, pleasure, all of the manifestations of having pleasure and contentment with. It's not like, you consider it a favor on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you have accepted faith. You will recognize His favor that He selected you to be one of the believers. So then, ذَاقَ طَعْمَ الْإِيمَانِ, he will taste the savor of faith, he who is pleased with Allah as his Lord, Islam as his deen or religion, and Muhammad as his prophet or messenger. I want to say that taste, this is, So once you have tasted the faith, which, like I said, is different from merely accepting the religion, because this is where the evidence led you, then you become capable of tasting the other truths of revelation and the universal truths as well. Once you have tasted faith, then your taste becomes appropriate. Then you could hear a hadith and have the proper taste when it comes to understanding of this hadith. You have the proper taste in understanding the Quran and in applying the hadith or applying the Quran. It's not the mere knowledge, it's also the taste that refines the knowledge. It is the taste that refines the knowledge. Taste will never be a substitute for the knowledge of Sharia, but it will always augment our understanding of it, refine our understanding of it. It's basically like if you have a lens and it's smudgy, when you remove the smudge, you'll have a better sort of perspective, and that is what the purification of the heart does. When you have this proper taste, you had already purified your heart, you don't have the smudge on the lens, so you have removed your self-interests, you have removed your biases, and now the tool is more capable of perceiving the truths and the facts. So one thing that is important here that he'll start by, and maybe we should talk about it when we get to it, or we're going to get to it right now. So what the Shaykh is saying is that dhawq is more permanent than wajd. It is not. It is, it is a quality that you will have. It's an established quality. You become a person of taste, appropriate taste, and this will enable you to have the proper understanding of the ayat, the ahadith, the way of the righteous predecessors, because you have become a person of taste, person who removed the smudge of the lens, person who had transcended their self-interests and their biases. Now the machine is working correctly. It will perceive the truths correctly. Then he said, وَهُوَ عَلَى ثَلَاثِ دَرَجَاتٍ. It is of 3 levels. الدرجة الأولى ذوق التصديق طعم العدة. First level is the tasting of belief, the savor of the promises. Thereby, so when your belief, that tasdeeq, tastes the savor of promises, the promises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now you're not only trusting the promises, you've tasted the promises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So once you've tasted, فَلَا يَعْقِلُهُ ظَنْ, doubts do not restrain it. Doubts do not restrain it. Restrain belief. Keep in mind that the doubts would restrain belief if belief is not augmented by taste. If belief is established through intellectual inquiry alone, doubts will restrain it, will hinder it, because there is no argument that is doubt-proof when it comes to intellectual inquiry. There is no argument, intellectual argument, on the existence of God. Whatever arguments they mentioned, ontological, cosmological, teleological, anthropic principle, when it comes to intellectual arguments, they're not doubt-proof. And the philosophers have always sort of recognized this, even the faithful philosophers, to a large extent, particularly from Kant's time. They have recognized that the sort of intellectual path to faith is somewhat deficient. That's why you find someone like Immanuel Kant, who was faithful himself. He said, I had to deny knowledge to make room for faith, or to make room for belief. I had to deny knowledge to make room for faith, or to make room for belief. And what did he mean by saying, I had to deny knowledge? Because, knowledge, particularly then, during Kant's time and prior to that, had to be so certain. It had to be acquired through very rigorous logical process to be called knowledge. And that is why, so sometimes even from the time of David Hume, who was the first person to talk about the psychology of belief in some detail and so on, they were not really saying that belief is not rational. They were not saying that faith is not rational. They were saying that it is rational. But, there has got to be other ways to acquire it, to reach certainty. It is, the logical argument alone, or sort of the logical process alone, will not lead you to certainty. Whatever that logical, because you have like different types of arguments. You have the analytic a priori argument, which is called deductive argument. That's good for math and stuff like this. And you have the a posteriori empirical argument that is good for natural sciences. And then you have the abductive and inductive arguments. And if you combine them all, To those philosophers, they don't lead you to certainty, but certainly with the abductive argument and inductive argument added to the other types of argument, they could lead you to certainty. But what is more important for us to understand is that natural belief and experiential belief. Natural belief is this spontaneous belief. That is the sort of your proclivity to belief. It is the tendency to believe. It is the God gene, as they describe it, that we're hardwired to believe in God. The remains of the primordial covenant, the remains of al-Mithaq al-Awwal, وإذ أخذ ربك من بني آدم من ظهورهم ذريتهم وأشهدهم على أنفسهم ألست بربكم. Behold, when your Lord took from the loins of Adam out his progeny, offspring, and then made them testify against themselves, am I not your Lord? They said, you are. That is the first covenant, that is the primordial covenant, Mithaq al-Awwal, and the remains of this is the God gene, the hardwiring that makes us prone to, that makes us in need of faith, belief. So that's natural belief. And then you have the experiential belief, which will come after you taste faith. After you experience faith, that is when you taste faith, that is when you have experiential belief. If you add the natural and the experiential to the intellectual arguments, so before the intellectual argument, you have that natural belief that is pushing you to look for God, to find the God, and then through the intellectual argument, you come to realize all sort of, whether it is deductive, empirical in some sense about the, not God himself, but to some sense about the manifestations and so on. And then the abductive and inductive, then you become established. You say that, yes, this makes sense. To the philosophers, this alone does not need the certainty, but add to it natural before, and then add to it after you have accepted faith, your experience of faith, your tasting, your zawq of faith, and then these combined will get you to a level of certainty that is matchless. Disambiguation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Couldn't Immanuel Kant be speaking in relation to Christianity? He denied knowledge.
No, he was not talking about Christianity as a doctrine per se, but he was talking about, metaphysics. He was talking about proving God through dialectics, proving God through a logical process of deduction, a priori knowledge, using the cosmological argument, using the teleological argument to prove the existence of God and to talk about the nature of God. He was not talking about Christianity per se. He was talking about the metaphysicians and their efforts to prove certain metaphysical facts. So if you combine them all together, then you will have that certainty. إنما المؤمنون الذين آمنوا بالله ورسوله ثم لم يرتابوا. The true believers are those who believed in Allah and His Messenger, then they did not have doubts. This experiential faith is important for one to, eliminate doubts, to not allow doubts, because like I said, the intellectual arguments alone will not be doubt proof, are not doubt proof. فلا يعقله ظن, doubts do not restrain it, do not restrain that belief. ولا يقطعه أمل, hopes do not interrupt it. ولا تعوقه أمنية, and wishes do not impede it, and wishes do not impede it. The difference between hopes and wishes is that hopes are usually, you hope in something that is tenable, that is that you could earn, that you could have. But wishes are usually in reference to things that are beyond reach. Wishes are usually, and some people have wishful thinking, and but then hopes and wishes will not interrupt that belief, will not impede that belief from reaching its final destination. Then the Shaykh said, وَالدَّرَجَةُ الثَّانِيَةُ ذَوْقُ الْإِرَادَةِ تَعْمَ الْأُنْسِ. The second level is the tasting of comforting intimacy, which is uns by the will. Thereby, فَلَا يَعْلَقُ بِهِ شَاغِل, it does not get tethered by any diversion. The will, you know. We're talking the first one is about tasdeeq. It is about, you know, the tasdeeq, tasting the sidq of the promises. Your faculty of believing, tasting the truthfulness of the promises. And then this second level is the level where your will tastes the comforting intimacy. After you have advanced on the path, and then you start to experience this comforting intimacy with your Lord, the will becomes energized. It is not just the tasdeeq, it is not just believing the promises, but rather your will, which is the most important part in you, your will. You know, that's the resolve, will. You know, the will is your driver to good or bad. And as Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah said, that, you know, العامة يقولون قدر كل امرئ ما يحسنه والخاصة يقولون قدر كل امرئ ما يطلبه. So يطلبه. So the public or the masses say that everyone everyone is measured according to what they master, and the khassa, the elites, say that everyone is measured according to what they seek, what they pursue, not what they master. Their aspirations, not their aptitude. Not their aptitude, but rather their aspirations, the will, and the resolve that they have to aspire for greater things. So, قَدْرُ كُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا يُحْسِنُهُ is what the public would say. Everyone is measured according to their aptitude, يُحْسِنُهُ, that which they master. And the khassa will say, or the elites will say, that everyone should be measured according to their aspirations, not their aptitudes, that which they seek or pursue. So the will now, where, you know, the first one was about, you know, you will believe and you will have, some people have this, you know, certainty of belief, but then does not alone move them, does not alone drive them. You're certain, you know, and you've had the intellectual and the natural and everything, and some of the experiential as well. And now this reaches you to a level of certainty that is doubt-proof, because you're certain, but then you don't have the drive. That's why the very ayah says إنما المؤمنون that we cited before إنما المؤمنون الذين آمنوا بالله ورسوله ثم لم يرتابوا وجاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم في سبيل الله. Verily, وجاهدوا, نعم, Verily the believers are the ones وجاهدوا في سبيل الله بأموالهم وأنفسهم إنما المؤمنون الذين آمنوا بالله ورسوله ثم لم يرتابوا وجاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم في سبيل الله. Okay, إنما المؤمنون, verily the believers are the ones, Surah al-Hujurat, verily the believers are the ones who believed in Allah and His Messenger and then had no doubts, and then ثم لم يرتابوا, then they had no doubts, and strove for the cause of Allah with their money. That's striving for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that jihad for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with their money and their lives, risking their wealth and their lives. That is the will, So sometimes certainty does not lead people who have low resolve. People who have low resolve, certainty will not be enough for them to lead them to good works, to higher aspirations, because they are people of low resolve. He says here, the second level is the tasting of comforting intimacy, uns, by the will, thereby, فَلَا يَعْلَقُ بِهِ شَاغِلٌ, it does not get tethered by any diversion. Now, if the will is energized, by tasting uns, tasting the comfort of intimacy with your Lord, the will is energized, then no diversion will tether it down, will pull it down, will hook it down to this dunya, or to, thaqaltum, weigh it down towards the earth. Their aspirations will be always higher, transcendent. They're not weighed down, not tethered to this earth or to the life of this world. وَلَا يُفْسِدُهُ عَارِض, and it does not get corrupted by interferences. Does not get corrupted by interferences. Any interference will not, on the way, you could be, sometimes the difference between the shaghal is a distraction, a diversion from the side of the road. The arid is an interference on the road. It's like a bump that you need to get around or get over on the road. The awarid can sometimes be caused by yourself, and sometimes your own recognition of your own work as a arid that could hurt you. So your own sort of recognition of your own work, of your own Salat al-Layl, or your own charity, it becomes an interference, because once you're seeing your work, you're seeing yourself, and that obstructs you, becomes a arid, an interference between you and watching your Lord, and being observant of your Lord, and being grateful towards your Lord who enabled you to pray, or who enabled you to give that charity. So the arid is on the way, not it's different from the shaghal, which is a diversion or a distraction. And then وَلَا تُكَدِّرُهُ تَفْرِقًا, and so it will not be tethered by any diversion, weighed down by any diversion. It will not be corrupted by any interferences on the road, and it will not be spoiled by any dispersion. It will not be spoiled by any dispersion. Dispersion is when your tafriqa, when your watching of, your recognition of the multiplicity of creations and events hinder you from realizing the oneness of the Creator, the first and the final cause, God, and that happens often. How many things are distracting us now? There are a lot of things that are distracting us. That is dispersion, that is tafriqa. And we always have this tafriq. And then it is important also, there was like recently a new study coming out of Germany, published by the American Psychology or American sort of association, American Psychology Association or something, about the effect of that feeling of oneness with a divine principle on the human and on our levels of satisfaction and our levels of gratification. So they basically interviewed many people of different faith backgrounds, and they found that the people who scored the highest, and that's in Germany, and they found that people who scored the highest were the Muslims, and the people who scored the lowest were the atheists, which would be expected for sure, because there's so much tafriqa. There's that sense of oneness, that sense that all things are in one hand, that sense of, and your feeling of oneness with the divine, also your feeling of oneness, your jam'iyya, your togetherness with the divine. It would be expected, I guess, that the atheist would score the lowest on this scale. So, but they found that the Muslims scored the highest. When we talk about oneness, you take it for granted because you just grew up thinking that there is one God, created this universe. We're all going back to Him. So you have a certain degree of that feeling of oneness that you take for granted, but you cannot imagine the effect of not having this. When everything around you will be, just piecemeal, retail. There is no overarching wisdom or meaning or anything. It becomes very, very draining, very sort of taxing to the soul. So لا تكدره تفرقة will not be spoiled by any dispersion. Your belief in farq, which is important for our Sunni understanding of jam'iyya and jam'a and these things, union and togetherness, so that we don't get into sort of Neoplatonic emanation and monism. We don't get into sort of these philosophical Sufi trends that have had a very grave impact on the aqidah of the Muslims, particularly at certain junctures of our history, where you don't discern anymore between the creator and the creation, because there is only the creator and we're all part of the one. No, we're not part of the one. Islam is very clear. There is a creator and there is a creation, and the creator is not the creation, and the creation is not the creator. Our sense of oneness, our realization that our creator, God, the creator, truly created things out of nothing. And those things that He created out of nothing are existent, because if they are not existent, then there is no miracle. There is no power. There is no concept of creation to begin with. But our creator is a real creator who created things out of nothing. They are existent. But at the end of the day, their existence is contingent, isn't it? At the beginning, it is contingent, and even their everlastingness, which we believe that some of His creations will be everlasting. The souls of the believers, by consensus, are everlasting. So the everlastingness of the believers in paradise is also contingent upon al-Hayy al-Qayyum, the living by Himself, al-Qayyum, the self-sustaining. We are all being sustained by Him. Even in paradise, it's not like going to be just like we're able to sustain ourselves. We're sustained by Him. So our recognition that we're being sustained by Him, He's the first and the final cause, and so on, will make that multiplicity of things around us sort of almost vanish. in our calculations, vanish in our not in our understanding, but in our calculations. You don't, factor them in your calculations. The pleasure of your Lord, conformity with the will of your Lord is your ultimate pursuit. That's it. That is the oneness. That is the togetherness that we're talking about. And this is the most beautiful thing, and this is the most calming thing to the soul, to the psyche, and most gratifying. So keep in mind that we have this difference between togetherness and union in the sense of monism. Our union is not in the sense of monism. Our union is in the sense of togetherness with God, or conforming to the will of God, to have complete conformity with the will of God subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he said, وَالدَّرَجَةُ الثَّالِثَةِ, and the third level, he said, ذَوْقُ الْانْقِطَاعِ تَعْمَ الْاتصال, the disconnected tasting, the disconnected tasting connectedness. The disconnected tasting connectedness. So after you have, and the inqita' that he's talking about here is disconnectedness. He considers the first and the second level to be still disconnected. The final level, which is complete conformity with the will of the divine, complete conformity with the will of the Lord, when the sort of the world vanishes in your perception, in your calculations, not necessarily perception, but in your calculations, in the sense that nothing at all would ever divert you from seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is when you start to develop connectedness, ittisal with your Lord. And that is, he puts this in the third level because he means to say that this is basically the phase of your fana. And as we said before, that is the Sunni fana, because it is the Sufism of sobriety, not the Sufism of intoxication, the Sufism of subsistence, not the Sufism of annihilation that we are for, or that we commend and seek to learn from. So that is the Sunni fana is, he says here, that after you have been disconnected, then you start to taste connectedness, and that is part of this phase of Sunni fana of your will into the divine will. وَذَوْقُ الْهِمَّةِ طَعْمَ الْجَمَى, the one with great resolve tasting togetherness with the divine. وَذَوْقُ الْهِمَّةِ طَعْمَ الْجَمْعِ, the one with great resolve tasting togetherness with the divine. And then he said, وَذَوْقُ الْمُسَامَرَةِ طَعْمَ الْعِيَانِ, and tasting the beholding of the divine during your soft conversation. So someone who is in prayer, the night prayer, that's the munajah with their Lord, they are in dhikr, and ذَوْق al-musamara, during this soft conversation with their Lord, whether they are in prayer or they are in dhikr. Imagine someone in the middle of the night and they are praying and they got to the 7th rak'ah, for instance, at the time of sahar, and then ta'am al-ayan, the savor of watching, beholding the divine. Certainly you're not going to behold the divine with the eyes of your head. That's talking about the eyes of your heart. If Musa was not granted that, you're likely not going to be granted that. You're not Musa, alayhi salam. But to some extent, the eyes of the heart could have the same level of certainty like the eyes of the head. So it is ayan in this case, like eyesight watching. Ayan means eyesight, watching by eyesight, because the eyes of your heart have become extremely discerning, extremely powerful, capable of sighting the divine. That's the eyes of your heart, not your head. During the times of soft conversation, that's the highest level of certainty or certitude that you could ever reach. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us that certainty. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us that comforting intimacy in His presence, in His hadra. قولوا قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.